evening and namaskar. Welcome to this special episode of Africa Talks on the occasion of Africa Day today. And the relationship between India and Africa goes back to several centuries. And the diplomatic engagement between India and Africa over the years has grown significantly. Particularly in the last few years, there has been a heightened action on the ground when it comes to building up relationship between India and various African countries, providing a great impetus to South-South cooperation. To talk more about that on the occasion of Africa Day today, we have four eminent panelists with us. I would like to first welcome Her Excellency Mrs. Judith K.K. Kangoma Kepijimpanga, High Commissioner of Zambia. Ma'am, thank you so much for joining us today in this discussion on India-Africa Today.
Thank you. Namaste.
Our second panelist today is Mrs. Josephine P. Nityam Ahai, Charge d'Affaires, Embassy of Gabon. Ma'am, thank you so much for joining us today in this discussion on the occasion of Africa Day. And we welcome you in this talk.
Thank you very much. Namaste. Good morning. No, in fact, good evening. Sorry. Thank you for the invitation.
Our third panelist today is Mr. Himadri Swan, who is Director of Indian Institute of Governance and Leadership. Mr. Himadri, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Good evening, Excellency.
Good evening.
Namaste.
And our fourth panelist is Mr. Ezio Namdi, who is the co-founder of Exilient Africa. Mr. Namdi, welcome to the show.
Good evening. Thank you all. Happy Africa Day.
Good evening.
Happy Africa Day and Eid Mubarak to everybody, to all our viewers also.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
In the last 5 years, we have seen a lot of work has been done both from Indian side and African side in rebuilding the relationship, which is spread over cultural ties, economic relationship, political interactions. A lot of things are happening, particularly after the third India-African Forum Summit that was organized in 2015. And later on, Indian Prime Minister, Mr. Modi, when he went to Uganda, and in the Ugandan parliament, he also gave a 10-point vision for India-Africa diplomatic relations. First of all, I would like to go to Her Excellency, the High Commissioner of Zambia, Mrs. Judith K.K. Kangoma Kepijimpanga. Ma'am, how do you see the evolution of India-Africa diplomatic relations in the last few years, and particularly the Indian-Zambia relationship?
Thank you very much. Namaste. From the outset, I would like to thank you for the invitation to be part of the panelists this evening. And I would also like to extend Eid Mubarak to our Muslim brothers and sisters. Yes. Indeed, Zambia-India relations have grown from strength to strength. We've had very fruitful relationship from the time of our forefathers, President Kaunda, who drew a lot of aspirations from Mahatma Gandhi in his fight towards Zambia's independence. And we've had high-level visits from the time of President Kaunda up until now. In 2018, April 2018, President Govind visited Zambia on a 3-day state visit, and there was reciprocity from his brother, his counterpart, His Excellency President Edgar Chagwa Lungu, in August of last year. That all goes to show just how deep our relationship has been from time immemorial, from the Mahatma Gandhi days. And during the last 5 years, India has continued to actively engage African countries for greater cooperation at both bilateral, multilateral levels towards sustenance of development in agriculture, energy, education, skill enhancement, and indeed peace and security. We have indeed seen high-level visits, and I would wish to underscore that Africa has been a Siamese twin to the Indian government and its people. And India continues today to cooperate with Africa to silence guns in order to create conditions favorable for investment by participating in peacekeeping operations in Africa. India has further continued to side with Africa during international affairs on global platforms. During the last 5 years, Zambia has benefited from increased levels of investment and trade volumes, and our figures have escalated. The list of items exported by Zambia to India still remains traditional copper, semi-precious stones, manganese, etc. However, the balance of trade remains an issue that needs to be addressed. There is need for dialogue and indeed to come up with tangible items that our people can export to India. We also welcome the Exim Bank lines of credit, and Zambia has benefited from the Exim Bank lines of credit through the construction of several health spots across the country, the rehabilitation of the Itezi Hydro Dam, and the decongestion of the Lusaka project. This is one huge project which India has done in Africa, and it's a huge marvel, and to that we are grateful.
Great. So I think a very broad-based areas of cooperation are there between India and Zambia. Coming to you, Mrs. Josephine Nityam Eha, we would be delighted to know about the growing diplomatic and trade relations between India and Gabon, if you can throw some light on that.
Thank you very much. Namaste again, and thank you very much for the initiative. In fact, India and Gabon have diplomatic ties since a long time now, during the 60s. And, but those diplomatic ties have been grown up in 2015 when the new vision of our President Ali Bongo Ndimba was to diverse the economic ties between different countries. And as everybody knows that India has skilled people and very creative. And so he decided to trust most of them. And by the special economic zone in our country, we opened the door to many Indian entrepreneurs there. And I can tell you that for this part, the economic ties between India and Gabon are very dynamic, And we have already 40 medium entrepreneurs in Gabon in the special economic zone as I'm speaking to you now. And in 2018, almost 440 million USD dollars were represented the part of the trade exchange between India and Gabon. And this is what I can say for this particular ties between India and Gabon. India and Gabon also are very respectful as far as common interests are defended in the United Nations. During my endeavor in United Nations as a counselor of the second committee, I have the honor to meet many of my fellow colleagues from India, and particularly the Minister of Civil Aviation of India, Mr. Puri. I had the opportunity to meet him during my endeavor in United Nations. So our relationships between Gabon and India are very, very good ones. And I don't know if you have another question. I can give you the answer.
I think that shows that the relationship between India and Gabon is really dynamic, and it's ever evolving, and it's getting a lot of pace also in the last few years. A lot of entrepreneurs are now reaching out to Gabon. Exactly. A lot of business development is happening between India and Gabon. So that's I think a really good indication of the South-South cooperation that we have been trying between India and Africa. Yeah. Coming to you, Mr. Himadrish Suwan, how do you see the emerging Africa as a place for investment, as a place for budding leaders of the world, as a place for digitalization wave, as a place for new kind of developments happening? What is your view about the new Africa?
Thank you, Mr. Narender Yadav, for inviting me. So the learned High Commissioner of Zambia and the Charge d'Affaires of Gabon, and my dear friend Izigo. It is indeed a great day as well as an auspicious occasion. And I must congratulate you on the occasion of the African Day. And thank you very much, India-Africa Today team, for organizing this thoughtful web meeting on how we could together foster the Indo-African blend. So I must appreciate you at outset for organizing this. And obviously, I believe that we have shared destiny, equal challenges, and almost same size of the population. The Indian population and the African continent population is almost the same size. And we obviously share a common median age. Like India also has a very youthful population. The median age in India is 26. The median age in Zambia is 19. So Africa is even younger. So I think that with a young demographic dividend lies immense potential. So I think that when more and more young people through established people-to-people mechanism would start discovering and exploring Africa as the next sought destination, I think that it would lay a strong foundation, a strong basis in order to foster a closer people-to-people ties between India and Africa. And obviously, when the Honorable Prime Minister of India in 2019 went to the Ugandan Parliament and he addressed the parliamentary session, he told that for us, the priority is not just Africa, but the priority is each and every Africans. Each and every people of Africa is a priority for India. So I think that post the visit of the Honorable Prime Minister of India, the momentum has gained a new strength, a new viability over a period of time. And now we are together working like brothers in different areas, whether, for example, right now, India and Africa, we are together fighting COVID-19 crisis. So when India decided to send the medicines, the medical aid, so Africa was a priority for the government of India. And even the Honorable Prime Minister had conversation with many state leaders in Africa on how together we can work and fight this pandemic. So I think that the situation is evolving in a more transparent and a positive manner. And I think that over a period of time, we would be having a more stronger and vibrant partnership between India and Africa. And obviously, on behalf of my organization and young people of India, we would be together as we closely work with the Zambian High Commission. In fact, we co-hosted the first India-Zambia Youth Dialogue under the chairmanship of the learned High Commissioner. So I think that such initiatives would be.
Yes. So I think what Himadrish was saying, that there is a lot more dynamism in the track to diplomacy also, where people-to-people cooperation, people-to-people relationship building is also happening between India and Africa. Coming to you, Mr. Iziogo Namdi, you are here in India for quite some time. You are studying here. What kind of feedback you have got from people here in India about Africa, and why you chose to come to India for your high studies, and how it's going to make an impact in your future as an African citizen?
Well, thank you very much, Narendra. It's indeed a wonderful day to be African. Basically, why I had come to India to study, that is something that I've been asked a lot of time, because most times people ask from the perspective of, are there no other universities in Africa where you could attend education? But you know, with Africans, migration is something that we really look forward to when we were growing up. We want to explore the world. So coming to India was just to come and see another part of the world and see how the people there actually treat our kind. So, and it's not been a sad experience in totality, because at some point we had a lot of challenges from community discrimination and various other societal menaces that Africans faced. But there's been a tremendous improvement because of, I think India has been playing soft diplomacy also. And they are trying so hard to attain that position, which is rightfully theirs, actually. It's a position that India is supposed to occupy in Africa by virtue of the relationship that exists between India and Africa. Now, when I talk about relationship, I mean relationship that's over 200 or 600 years old. Because when we talk about migration, we migrated first to India and closer places, which were former Persian territories. But you know, over time, this relationship has not been very mutual. We had the same experience, a colonial experience, and our systems were distorted. So, but I think with the modern age right now, I mean, with the youthful population currently, there's a lot of improvement being done in getting things on track. The average African youth and the average Indian youth just seeks a shared future. Because we've realized that the rest of the world is doing very well, and we are nowhere, we don't have that place. So except we collaborate and tap into our human resource population, I mean, for Africans and the Indian youths, then we can be able to emerge as leaders of tomorrow, of today, actually, not tomorrow. So I think there's a lot of improvement that's happening, and it's a good sign that the future is actually gold for us.
So the youth of India and the youth of Africa have a shared future in the global world. That's what Mr. Namdi is saying. Coming back to you, Excellency, we have seen that COVID-19 is a global pandemic and has caused a lot of social, economic, devastation in several countries. How has been India's response towards Africa and towards your country in particular in the wake of COVID-19 pandemic? Excellency.
Thank you once again. I would like to state that COVID-19 epidemic is a huge health crisis across the globe, which has exacerbated the social and economic sectors of the world. This is a huge global challenge that needs to be addressed by joint concerted effort of all nations. And in this regard, I would wish to commend the Indian government for the manner in which the COVID-19 pandemic has been handled towards African countries and African nationals. I want to state that the Indian government, through the Ministry of External Affairs and the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, did call for a meeting with all the diplomatic corps resident in India. And they ran us through the outlined programs as how they were going to attack this epidemic. And we were in full consultation, and they did not leave anyone behind. You see, this pandemic does not attack race, does not attack religion, but it has attacked every human being across the globe. And the government indeed has been very, very diligent in the manner in which they've handled this pandemic. And they've looked at issues consultatively with the inclusion of all of us, African, European, and everybody alike who is resident here in India. And during our meeting at Ministry of External Affairs, the diplomatic corps made submissions to the government of India, and we received very, very brilliant clarifications from the Indian government. And since then, we've had regular updates to the diplomatic corps through the Ministry of External Affairs, through issuance of note papers, and we've been given guidelines each and every time. And I wish to commend the government of India for that. And I further wish to appreciate the measures the government of India has put in place in terms of prevention, contact tracing, and treatment to stem the spread, morbidity, and indeed mortality associated with the COVID-19 epidemic. And I wish from the outset to express any ignorance of any discrimination by the Indian government on the basis of race, religion, or otherwise. They have not been selective, and the public health threat affects the lives and livelihoods of everybody within India. And I wish to commend them and underscore that fact. And I wish to express the commitment of the Zambia High Commission and Zambian nationals living here in India that wish to underscore and put forward our unflinching support to fight the pandemic with the Indian government. I submit.
The learned High Commissioner has clearly outlined that how India and Africa together fighting this pandemic, which is affecting everyone irrespective of the race, religion, caste, or gender. Coming to you, Mrs. Josephine Nitem-Eha, how would you like to comment on India's response to Africa's requirements and needs in the time of this pandemic?
Okay. Excuse me. What I can say about is that the reaction of the India government was very wonderful, very responsible and responsive. India is a very important partner in this struggle against the COVID-19 pandemic now. many of our African countries are receiving help from India. From my country, the government does not yet express a need, but when it will be ready to do that, I will, with pleasure, extend all the need to the India government. But for the whole, I can say that the India reaction is very important and very responsive. Now, what I can add to that concerning the COVID-19 pandemic, COVID-19 pandemic brings lessons to our people, and particularly in Gabon. In Gabon, we had a kind of conscience that we have to be present on the ground, and all the people there are very aware that this pandemic is very dangerous, and we have to take care of ourselves. We have to observe all the social distanciation, and our government is very serious to respond to this struggle. Every day, the population has information how to be safe, how to stay safe, and how to just to cure. But maybe not to cure because we do not have yet the response, the medical response one, but the government is doing efforts to let the population know exactly what to do. This is in my country. But in the other part, I can say that the COVID-19 pandemic novel brings the willing to do business, to do business by producing masks on the ground. We produce masks in Gabon. We produce sanitizer, gel sanitizer in Gabon. And this is very wonderful because units are created, a kind of maybe not industrialization, but manufacturing is rising. And this is very important for us. Time is to go to the process of industrialization, and it is like that. Those are the first steps. And we are very happy for this. This is what I can share about the COVID-19 pandemic.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Josephine Nitya. Let's move from COVID-19 to the post-COVID-19 world. We can see some initial developments happening globally and which are going to have serious repercussions on the global world order. Mr. Himadrish Swan, can you hear me? I mean, Mr. Swan?
Yes, please.
Yes. How do you see what could be the key priority areas for India and Africa in the post-COVID-19 world, especially in the context of the changing global world order?
See, as we know that the world would never be the same again, and the positive aspect of our diplomatic relations between India and Africa is the demographic dividend, that both India and Africa, we share a very youthful population. And these youthful population would be shaping the destiny of both India and Africa in the coming years. So I think that there's an urgent need to harness this demographic dividend. And the best way to harness this is through people to people, cultural to cultural, student-student cooperation. As we are aware that a huge chunk of African students, they travel to India to pursue their studies in the field of tertiary education. So I think that the young people, the youth, the sector, the youth chambers could come forward and harness this demographic dividend, we could provide a more secure and a safe environment to them. They should feel home away from home in India. And I think that a joint mechanism could be developed through different channels which are supporting the cause of the Indo-Africa diplomatic ties. And we could make them feel home away from home. And through this, we could harness various skill developmental opportunities in the areas of business, education, summer camps, visit of delegation, export, import of youth to youth cooperation. So these fundamentals could be included as part of our bilateral exchanges, because if we could harness this demographic dividend, then no one could stop the century being a joint Indo-African century. Because if the India and Africa could together synergize, because we share common values, we share the common population density, and in fact, we have a relation which dates back to Mahatma Gandhi. In fact, Mahatma Gandhi once remarked that I was born in India, but I was made in South Africa. So this is the eternal bond we share between India and Africa. And obviously Nelson Mandela is a household inspiration for everyone here. So I think that such positive aspects between our two relations could be highlighted in the post-pandemic world. And together, both India and Africa could come forward with the policies to make the youth more useful. Because I always say that youth are not useless, they are used less. So if we'll use our youth potential together, I think that the century belongs to India and Africa, and we could together create wonders in the post-pandemic world.
Okay, so harnessing the demographic dividend to cement India-African ties in the post-COVID world. That's what Mr. Swan has to say. Mr. Namdi, what's your views and what's your perception about how India and Africa are going to further strengthen their ties in the post-COVID world?
Well, if you would look, just like our excellencies have mentioned, including Himadrish, I think we're not losing track. We are on the right track. But post-COVID-19 in India, it would be very, very difficult economically also, and the same is applicable in African countries. And a lot of people have lost their jobs right now. So it means that a lot of newer jobs are going to be created. What that means is there's going to be a lot of youthful startups, startups which are going to be, right now people are at home and they are thinking and getting these ideas of what they can do. And India, under the leadership of the Honorable Prime Minister, has moved for a self-reliant economy. Now, prior to that, actually, we were campaigning for a $5 trillion economy. So I had always said in most platforms that $5 trillion economy is not something that India can acquire for herself alone. India needs the support of the world, and actually not just the world, but Africa in particular. The closeness that exists between India and Africa can even be seen by how Africans have adopted Bollywood movies, Z movies, and all these platforms. It's so close that it cannot be overemphasized. So I think there is going to be a lot of changes, particularly in the migration of people to India. Most people, even if they can afford to travel to India for education, would prefer to stay back because of the economical implications that's there to them, the risk of flying right now, and also it's just that the normal is no longer the normal. So I think the best way that we can go right now, because India has for a long time been looking for an opportunity to actually take her place in Africa, would be to move a lot of things from India to Africa. So Africa needs a lot of things in terms of development, be it physical infrastructure, be it technical partnership, technological transfer. So we have a lot of youths right now who are actually ambassadors of their respective African country. And with the way we've championed Pan-Africanism so far, it's going to have a more ripple effect if we can have a lot of involvement of these youths who have, majority of them are graduating right now and they'll be moving back to their countries. Majority have already booked their flight, just like Her Excellency here, the Zambian High Commissioner, has contributed immensely to the evacuation of Zambians here. That's a huge applause to you, ma'am. It's a wonderful development. So we think that these people have to be engaged from now. If we are talking about a successful, sustainable, shared future, it has to be with people who understand the fundamentals, who have a background of how the Indian mindset is, how the Indian system works. And that way the relationship can be further solidified. So if we are moving to a shared future, I think just like as my friend Himadrish has pointed out, youths have a role to play, and not just by connecting youth to youth, but also having policies and mechanisms that support sharing. You know, Africa cannot do it alone, India cannot do it alone, but we believe that a measure of our forces can actually take us to a greater height. So I'm looking from that perspective, and also drawing the attention of the Indian government and our honorable embassies and ambassadors here, high commissioners here, that there needs to be also a post-COVID-19 pandemic or a post-lockdown sensitization. A lot of people have been locked down right now, and they'll be coming out of lockdown very soon, which we hope so. There's going to be a lot of things that they are going to be faced with because they are not yet awoken to the realization, the majority of them, that things have changed. So they'll face a lot of issues in balancing things. And if we can from now, through our various organizations, youthful organizations, just like the Institute of Governance and Confederation, or our own Center for Excellence and Innovation, if we can merge forces and initiate an awareness campaign from now, before the lockdown is eased, we think it will go a long way to curtail the challenges which people will face if this lockdown is actually eased. So I'm looking from that angle so that we don't have repetitive patterns in terms of discrimination and challenges that people are going to face. We don't want that for India and Africa relations. It should be smooth.
Okay, great. So some kind of focus on local capacity development of youth in Africa and providing them new opportunities in their own countries is something that India can play an important role. And that's how they can have a shared future, a more sustainable future for India and Africa. Exactly. Coming to you, Excellency, what you see are the key priority areas for India and Zambia in the coming next decade?
Thank you again. The post-COVID priority areas, I think we need to dialogue and reevaluate our stance. And I think that you've noticed that a lot of, I have quite a huge populace of Zambian students who have come here to learn, but during the post-COVID, it would be a bit difficult to have parents send their children to India for school. So it's important that the universities here in India consider partnering with the universities back in Africa and in Zambia in particular, because I think that parents can afford to pay the fees, but the issue of air tickets and also with the challenges of the post-COVID era, it would be a huge uphill battle. So I think the education sector in India needs to reconsider and reevaluate, and also the consideration also would be towards ensuring that online studies are put into perspective. That is also another issue that can be looked at. And in terms of also health, a lot of Africans, a lot of Zambians come into India in all the states for treatment and to seek medical review, medical treatment during the post-COVID era. That would also pose a bit of a problem. So again, the numerous hospitals that are in India must consider partnering with already existing hospitals in Zambia, or indeed considering going to put up a multi-facility specialist hospital, because they would still score a first, because they would offer the same services and people will afford to pay. But bringing patients here would be an uphill battle. And also our trade facilitation, we also need to reevaluate ourselves and also look at more items that we can trade with India, other than the already, items that we trade like copper, semi-precious stones, manganese, and all the exports that India takes into Zambia. Because it is about time we also looked at the trade imbalance. We need a lot of value addition, and also India needs to look at other items which they can bring into India apart from the already existing ones. And also, from the High Commission's point of view, I want to emphasize that we are considering holding an international exhibition of mainly agriculture equipment, solar products, and other fundamental items that Zambia could put on the table through the High Commission. It will be important if the exhibition took place by the end of the year. This exhibition will intend to actualize the dreams and aspirations of people much better than ordinary meetings. And sometime last year, the CII held a symposium in Lusaka, and the turnout was very good because even other SADC countries attended, and a lot of partnerships were put in place. So we are expecting to hold such a symposium later during the year. And I'm also proposing, if it's possible for the Exim Bank to travel to Zambia and carry out more sensitization programs with the government and individual ministries, as well as organizations, especially on the buyer's credit, because sometimes if the explanations are not well taken, at the end of the day, people seem to misunderstand. And also, the International Solar Alliance is another issue that we need to reevaluate. It would be important for ISA to send an envoy to Zambia and maybe other African countries as well to shed more light on the alliance and what it stands for. On the other hand, I would presume that India would consider building a multi-specialist hospital in Zambia, endorsed at the highest level. And I'll tell you why they should do this. Zambia is landlocked country, but we dub ourselves as landlinked. We are surrounded by 8 neighbors. So if a hospital were built in Zambia, it will cater for the entire 8 neighbors and beyond. And Zambia is a peaceful country. And miraculously, we have harmonious relationships with all our 8 neighbors. You can imagine. So that goes to show and give confidence to whoever would want to put up a hospital that their investment will be secured. And India should consider having more investments in Zambia in areas such as agriculture, mining, construction, as well as energy, because I want to emphasize that their investments will be secured. I submit.
Excellency, thank you so much. I think there are wide areas of cooperation which can be further strengthened in the post-COVID world, especially as Her Excellency talked about education, health, agriculture, and trade. These are some of the big areas where India and Zambia relations can really go up in the coming decade. Africa Day, as we know, it's an opportunity to introspect as well as to dream and prepare for the shared future of Africa. How do you think today's youth in Africa would be able to develop, would be able to see a change Africa in the next 10 years? Would today's youth in Africa would be able to utilize his or her potential or his or her academic qualifications fully to have a more prosperous future in the next 10 years in Africa? So your last comments on this topic, and then we'll close the program. I would request Mrs. Josephine Nitya to please give her comments on what the next 10 years has in store for youth in Africa.
Thank you very much. I would like to say about that, African youth are very, in fact, they are the future, and most of governments would like to give them the trust they merit, the trust in any sector they would like to rise themselves. And what I can say is that they have to keep on creating. They have to keep on innovating too. And what is the future is what our youth would like to get the future become. This is what I can say about youth in Africa. And in my country, I am very glad to say that young Gabonese are very creative, and our government accompanies them with many tools. And we are very glad for that. And the proof is that here in India, you have some Gabonese in very important schools, very important, how can I say that? Because I'm with my counselor of academics on academics issues. We have many students in very important universities here in India, and we had signed MOU with University of Punima in Jaipur. We hope to send postgraduate students there, and this is what I can say. We are very glad to have a very important ties with India, between India and Gabon. Thank you.
Great. So Gabonese government has been putting a lot of effort in the human capital, and especially in providing good educational facilities to Gabonese youth here in India.
Exactly.
Coming to you, Mr. Himadrish, your last words about the potential for African youth in the next 1 decade.
See, as I mentioned earlier, that the potential is immense. It is very bright and radiant, because the African youth, they derive inspiration from Mahatma Gandhi and Nelson Mandela. Who could be a better example than both of them for creating a new vibrant society with a shared future. So I think that in the coming years, the African youth would harness their potential, would harness their dividend, and obviously the young people of India would stand shoulder to shoulder with the brothers and sisters in Africa, and we would be together complementing and supplementing their vision, and together launching several programs to benefit the Indian and the African citizenry at large. So I think that post-COVID, we would collaborate together and we would work together to have a shared future in the coming years.
So post-COVID is the time for collaboration for a shared future. Coming to you, Mr. Iziu Namdi, your last words for African youth in the next 1 decade.
Well, since I was born, we've always been told that the future, the future, the future. So I'm actually now among the category of youth who think that the future is now, and we would not relent until things actually get in place. I was listening to a speech by His Excellency Paul Kagame, where he mentioned that if Barack Obama, the former president of the US, was bred and grown up in Africa, if he had grew up in Africa, he would have lost sight. He would not have become the president of the United States. So it goes a long way to tell us about what is needed in Africa. From a diaspora perspective, we've been offered an opportunity to telescopically look at Africa and see the places where Africa needs to improve on. And believe me, capacity building, human capacity building is one of those sectors. But complementing that would be government leadership. So we need leadership that actually believes in youth. I'm really, really grateful that Her Excellency, both Excellencies could join us today for this session, because it was something that we've been looking up to have the African youths, actually those who are in India, to get an audience of our own parents here. They could address us. We even wanted the Africa Day celebration to be so huge that the 44 or 45 high commissions and ambassadors could participate. But I think there's always a start. Himadrish, it's a shared future for us, whether we like it or not. It's going to be mutual. It's going to be more sustainable because of our experiences. So I think with the spirit of Ubuntu, we can actually accomplish a lot. And I just want to be positive that 10 years from now, it's our own responsibility as African youth to take care of the world. It's not going to be the other way around, where the world take care of us. It's our own turn to take care of the world. Thank you.
Mr. Namdi, African youth, African youth is their responsibility to make their own destiny in the coming 10 years. I would now request Her Excellency to give her message to youth of Africa on the occasion of Africa Day today.
Thank you very much. I would like to borrow the words of President Franklin Roosevelt, who's, and I quote, "We cannot build the future for our youth, but we can build our youth for the future." So it's important that we give direction to the youth for better, in order for us to have better citizens of tomorrow. Africa Day is a day where we celebrate Africa's freedom and liberation. It also provides a platform to promote African unity for deeper regional integration and development, and the youth are very cardinal in this realization of the continent's development agenda. Africa has the largest concentration of young people in the world, with more than 240 million, and this figure is likely to soar or treble by the year 2050. This is Africa Renewal of April 2016. I quote, "The youth in Zambia account for 36.7% of the population, and the government has therefore put in place a number of measures and investment in the youth for a sustainable future. The youth are the leaders of tomorrow. It has been widely said. I therefore urge them to take advantage of the various policies, initiatives and programs for youth empowerment, and become responsible and resourceful leaders that will drive the African economic agenda forward and transform our very beautiful continent, Africa." I thank you.
Those were the last words from Her Excellency for Africa's youth on the occasion of Africa Day. And this brings us to the end of this program. It was a wonderful experience having you on the show, Your Excellency, Mrs. Judith K.K. Kangoma Kapajimpenga. Thank you so much for taking out time and joining us today in this program. Thank you, Mrs. Josephine Nyam Itya. It was wonderful having you in the discussion today and knowing so much about India-Gabon relations. Thank you, Mr. Izio Ganamdi, for bringing in the issues and the challenges that will be there for youth in the post-COVID world.
Thank you.
And thank you so much, Mr. Himadrish Suwan, for bringing in the whole perspective of youth and the shared cultural roots they have. That will go a long way in bringing the shared relationship, which we look forward to in the coming decades between India and Africa.
Thank you.
Viewers, it was a special show today on the occasion of Africa Day, and we'll be back next week with another show. Good day and goodbye. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.